Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning. As you probably realize, this is another webinar in our webinar series. And before you might ask, you will receive the recording of this afterwards. And the recordings of our other webinars are also available. A few housekeeping notes. So you have the chat and the questions functions on the right side of your screen. The chat can be used for any technical issues, and questions should be questions on the content, which I will hopefully be able to answer towards the end of the presentation today. So as you realize, of course, today we'll speak mostly about the ERC program. So the title of the talk of the webinar is about financing young or not only young but also established group leaders, research group leaders, and the ERC program is really the main program for this purpose in Horizon Europe, which is the main framework funding program. I won't give you a lot of details about Horizon Europe and the details. You can look those up in our previous webinars where we get a bit more into the details. So just very briefly, what is our function and our role as national contact points? So even though we're hosted in the National Innovation Agency, we are really the contact point for Horizon Europe for both public and private research in Luxembourg. And our aims are really to help you participate in the programs and help you get more successful proposals, help you along the way, even after projects have been granted, to help you with questions, administrative, legal, financial questions. At the same time, because we have this contact with the more private industry side in Luxembourg, we also try to establish links between public and private research wherever possible. Now, you probably realize, if you know a bit about ERC, and I will not start today from really zero. I expect that most of you already have a somewhat solid background knowledge on ERC and what it is, even though I will give you a few recapitulations. But you will certainly realize that ERC is mostly a financial program for public research, for academic research. It's not exclusively, so there's no mandate that ERC group leaders cannot be part of a private research institute, but the vast majority is. And whenever, I want to stress this throughout this talk, whenever you feel like there's an issue or question that you want to discuss privately or in more depth, then please arrange a personal meeting. This sort of webinar can really not replace a one-to-one discussion especially on topics like ERC, where it's very personal, and you might have really more questions about where you want to lead your project. So what do we do? What are our services? This is now more general in Horizon Europe. So we try to help you find the right topics to whatever your needs are. We offer trainings like this one on a regular basis. We can help with consortium building for the calls that need a consortium, so multiple partners throughout Europe. Then we help with the proposal writing, meaning we do reviews. So this is also true for ERC, and I'll get more to the ERC specific services in a second. We also representing Luxembourg in the program committee. So this is where the member states sit together with the European Commission to discuss the contents of the calls and the programs. So if there's anything that you notice that doesn't work properly or doesn't work the way you expect it to work, please get in contact so that we can bring these issues up. So now, more specifically for ERC, how can we get involved as NCPs in the ERC program? So I think most importantly, we can do reviews of your proposal, if necessary, multiple rounds. That's really depending on you. There's no need to involve us as NCPs. We are really just another layer of support in case you need it. So we don't provide, in most cases at least, we don't provide any scientific feedback on the proposal, but it's more all the rest basically. How you formulate your thoughts, your project, if it's in the right context, if it's clear, etc. Yeah, that's basically summing up a bit this slide. We can answer questions also regarding configurations if you want to involve other partners in your ERC project outside of your organization. So that can get very tricky. So I won't discuss this in a lot of detail. So again, Horizon Europe, really in a nutshell. So just one slide. We are here in the red square. This is Pillar 1, Excellent Science, and the European Research Council grants. That's what we will discuss today. So you see here in the background of this image is the Covent Garden building. That's part of where the ERC executive agency is located. So you obviously, if you're not so familiar with ERC, you might wonder what this whole thing is about and how it works. So there's three main parts, I would say, of the ERC program. So you have the Scientific Council. So these are prominent researchers that are appointed by the EC that should cover a bit all thematics. So these are really standing out and discussing more the scientific development and strategy of ERC. They're in charge of quality control, but also outreach, which is very, very important for ERC. Then you have the panel members. So depending on your topics and your areas, you will choose a specific panel where you want to submit your proposal. The panel members are appointed by the council. They really give an independent review and evaluation of your proposal. But they also appoint additional referees in a second round of evaluation. So these would be really then the experts around the world that would remotely evaluate your proposal and provide additional feedback. Then you have the ERCEA, the executive agency, which is in charge of implementing the calls, organizing everything, helping with the grant agreement, and so it's more the administrative arm of the ERC. So you're probably familiar with this, but I will go into it again. There are different ERC schemes depending on your career level. So obviously, the ERCs are really for more senior scientists. So in general, after your PhD, after your postdoc even though there are some exceptions and we can discuss those. So the first round, which would be the starting grants, you can see here, I'm referring now with these cutoff dates. So the cutoff dates define the time that has passed after you finished or after you received your PhD degree. So I'm referring here to the next calls. So as you will see soon, the starting grants, this next deadline is very soon. The consolidated grant as well. So you can more or less calculate yourself if you're going to apply next year. You can more or less just add another year to these cutoff dates, and this will give you the date. There are possible extensions for this cutoff date. So for maternity leave, you automatically, well, you have to ask for it, but you get 18 months extension per child. So basically, with your proposal, you just add in the annex, you add a birth certificate. For paternal leave, it's a bit more complicated. You get an extension by the actual amount of time that you've taken as paternity leave, and you need to prove this somehow. So these are the cutoff dates. You see them here for the starting grants and the consolidated grants. You also see the budgets. They are accordingly a bit higher the later you are in your career development. As you see for the starting grants, it's generally 1.5 million for a 5-year project. There is the possibility to get another 1 million, and we can discuss more specifically in details when this would apply. So this additional 1 million is generally for relocation costs if you move to another country. In this case, if you relocate your research group, for example, to Luxembourg. sorry, but also can be used for large equipment, for specific cases. We can discuss this in detail. You see here more or less the qualifications that are expected. They're somewhat fluent and not very strictly fixed, because the Commission wants to give a bit of flexibility, because not everybody's situation is exactly the same, and they want to take this somehow into account. The rough guideline is you should have had one for the starting grants. You should have had one important publication as a main author, ideally without your PhD supervisor, but that's not absolutely mandatory. Now we can argue what is an important publication, but this is generally something that you have to argue yourself in your proposal. You can see for the consolidated grants, it's a bit more advanced. Simply, basically, if you, with the extensions, if you have the chance to be able to apply to starting grants, of course, generally in relation to your career stage, you should choose an earlier career stage, but it's also not mandatory. So if you can pick both, it's up to you, but generally people recommend to go for the more junior one. Now on the right side, I just show a slide to show you how competitive the ERC program really is. And that means that, so above the excellent proposals, there are the outstanding proposals. And even within these outstanding proposals, there's a cutoff, and there's proposals that will be financed and proposals where there's simply that are outstanding, but there's simply not enough money to finance all of them. And that's something you need to take into account. So even if you don't make it in the first run, you have to realize that it's not necessarily a devastating blow to your research idea, but it's just simply the reality that this is extremely, extremely competitive. So as we move along with career stages, you have the advanced grants. They're generally really for very established, very senior researchers. But also, so there's an important element is that there's basically no PhD necessary to apply for these schemes, but you still need to be a very high profile researcher to be able to really have only a chance. So it's not that you can do this, you know, as your PhD project. Clearly not. But it's also important for the advanced grants that you need to have. It's not an end of career award. So you need to be an active researcher still and have produced active research in the last 10 years. There's also the synergy grants. They work a bit differently. In principle, the synergy grants are a consortium of PIs that apply together for a very large project that would not be able to be done individually. And they can cover different profiles. So it's the minimum is 2 up to 4 different researchers and their respective research groups, of course. And they should obviously work synergistically towards a large project. They can be from the same institution. They can be from different countries around Europe. One of the 2, 3, or 4 researchers in a synergy consortium can even be based outside of Europe. Very often it's the US, for example, but it might be, I don't know, China, Japan, etc. And the budgets accordingly are very large. For the synergy grants, it's 10 million plus an additional 4 million, and it can take 6 years. So here are the next deadlines. You see that we only have the starting, consolidated, and advanced grants scheduled for this year. That is, sorry, because you don't see the synergy grants because the deadlines are not fixed yet. There is no synergy grant called Synergy Grant 2021. There might be a synergy grant next year, and it might be that the deadline for the call next year is already end of this year. It's a bit complicated, I realize, but keep it in mind that this is still an option and it will come up. And especially if you want to do a synergy grant, you need to start way in advance to really build up this extremely competitive proposal. So you see the call deadlines. I don't know if you realize, but the deadline for the starting grant has been changed 1 or 2 times from the preliminary published deadline. So the 4th of April is now the official final deadline. But you see, it's very soon, of course, so it's not something where you start to think now about possibly applying for this deadline. This is something I would certainly not recommend if you're not already very advanced in your proposal writing. You will also see a rough date to inform the applicant on the outcomes, which can be useful. How does the evaluation process work? You have basically 2 steps of evaluation. For the synergy grants, you even have a 3rd step. It's a bit more complicated there. And the 2 steps refer also a bit to the 2 parts of the ERC proposal. So if you're already a bit more familiar with the ERC templates, there's a B1 and a B2. In the step 1, it's the B1 part that will be evaluated. This is evaluated by the panel that you chose. And the panel is generally what we call more generalist profiles. So meaning these are not specialists on your particular project necessarily. You can have a look at the panel compositions. I get to that in another slide. But you get a rough idea of who is present in these type of panels and what kind of expertise in relation to your topic they might have. So here, the B1 part is more about general terms. How feasible is your project in their eyes? What's the impact on outside of your very particular niche that you might be working in? So really make people slightly outside of your field understand what it is that you want to do, why it's realistic, why it's feasible, why it's new, and why it's important. And you can see there's roughly 25% of the calls, the proposals, sorry, make it to step 2 then. In step 2, they will be evaluated again by the panel, but this time it's also the part B2, so the full proposal in principle. But it's also important the external referees, and these external referees, these are really the experts in your field, like the ones you would that would review your publications, for example. At the same time, you will receive an invitation for an interview. So in the past, these were physical interviews, obviously, in Brussels. Now, the last year, it was remote. I'm strongly suspecting that at least for the starting and possibly the consolidator, it will still remain remote. But we don't have a final word on that yet. And so they invite roughly 1/3 of the people that will be invited for the interviews or to step 2 in that matter will be funded. So you have a rough idea. There are restrictions if you submit a proposal that's of lower quality, we should say. So score B is not making the cut. So it basically means that there's some validity to your project, but there are also, the project just simply needs to be redesigned, re-evaluated, really incorporate the feedback that you receive from the reviewers. So I'm speaking here about step 1. You can also receive a score B at step 2, but that really is different. A score C really means that this is the wrong type of call for your project idea. So either it is because you don't have the profile as a PI, or the project isn't flying, or generally it's a mix between the 2. And you will see that you will be blocked depending on your score. So if you receive a score B, you will not be able to apply for the following year. So you need to wait another year. Now, what are the evaluation criteria? There's basically 2 elements to this. So you have the PI on one side and you have the project on the other side. So these are rough examples that I show you here. I will not read them. You can find them on the links also below. They're spelled out. These are the old evaluation criteria. They might change slightly. We will only know this in the coming weeks or so, but they will certainly be very close. Right? So for the PI, it's really about are you the right person to do this project? And then for the project, it's it can more or less be broken down to the relevance. How relevant is your project? How novel is it? What's the impact on your field, but also beyond your field? And what's the feasibility? How likely are you to really bring this project to a successful end? So there are also some, I call them here personal checkpoints. So these are points that you should think about yourself very strongly before getting into the writing, and then pick them up, maybe answer them for yourself on a sheet of paper, and then incorporate the elements somehow, somewhere in your proposal. Again, the novelty is obvious. It's not enough to just do something slightly better than what you've been doing all along or what other people have been doing. There needs to be a dramatic step. And again, there's no golden formula for what that is. But generally, you have a pretty good feeling yourself, and at least your scientific peers will be able to help you with that. It needs to be groundbreaking, and it goes along the same lines. So really something that's significantly going beyond the state of the art. Why are you doing this? It might be trivial for you. It might not be so trivial for the reviewers. And it depends a lot on your thematics, I have to say. So for some people, it's relatively easy if you're more in health or cancer or even climate research. I think pretty much everybody has a pretty good understanding of why that matters, why it's important. If you're developing a very complicated set of machine that nobody has done before, it can be more tricky to explain, but it still means you need to explain it, or at least try to explain it. It might be less important in that matter, but it's still an issue that you need to raise. Why now is important as well. Why hasn't it been done before? Why can it not wait another 5 years or so? Why you? That's obvious. Then the risk is important, that you realize yourself what is the risk and you don't hide it. Especially not for the ERC, there's this thing, this element called high risk, high gain that should be throughout your proposal, meaning that your project should have a significant, or part of it should have a significant risk. But if this risk is mediated, or if you can achieve your results, you will have a very high gain, and it will be all worth it. If your project fails, that's possible. That's science, right? Nobody expects you or mandates that you need to succeed, but you need to take it into account and be aware of it and show everybody that you're aware of it. Then collaborations, we can discuss more specifically. Collaborations are possible within ERC, but it's something that you need to think carefully about how you do it, in which legal form you do it, how you involve other parties. Generally, everybody that you collaborate with within your own hosting institution is relatively easy. So you might ask yourself, why do you want to do an ERC in the first place, right? And the obvious answer might be, well, it's good money, but that shouldn't be the first answer. I don't suspect for the most people that it's the first answer, but it shouldn't be, because it's just too competitive for it. There are other ways of getting research money. It should be really to give you visibility and a career boost. And it's also very prestigious, obviously, for your research host. So they should put a lot of energy into helping you if they trust you with this, in helping you achieve this goal. So the money should really only be secondary. It should be an award that you receive, but the ERC title and the visibility, the excellence label, that should be your primary goal. So very often people ask, am I ready to do an ERC? And there's simply no real answer to it. You can often discuss it with your peers, and they might be able to help you. It's always useful to discuss with previous ERC grantees, especially in your domain. And if you have trouble finding those, you can get in touch with us and we can try to help you. It's good to look a bit in what other people have been, what their career stages are. It's very easy. You just go to the ERC website, you click on your thematic, you enter your keyword, and you will find all the projects on that keyword. And you can look up these projects and find out who were the PIs and what were their career stages. Generally, this is more or less public information, so you should be able to find it out. And this might help you to get a sense. But then again, it's still very individual and there's exceptions always. So it's a very tricky question to answer. More often than not, I would say people are too hesitant and prolong and drag it out until they are doing an ERC and submitting for the first time. It's generally something I wouldn't recommend, but you need to be aware that if you are doing an ERC, it's not worth it if you're not willing to commit the energy and time into the proposal writing. It's just a waste of time. You won't learn a lot if you only do it half-heartedly. So a rough overview of slides. These are somewhat old data, but you can see here different schemes. We can focus here on the success rates, which are around between 9 and 14%. On the right side, this is quite interesting. You see sort of a learning curve, right? For new applicants, you see the score is the people that will be funded is generally the lowest, but people that reapply after they were unsuccessful for the first time, there's already a significant increase in people that will be funded. So because they take up the lessons that they learned during the writing, they probably have more time to put into the proposal. They realize probably where the weaknesses are if they haven't done so already. And then you can see people that have already received an ERC. So that's what's written here under grantee. They are significantly more likely to receive another ERC because they just learned a lot through the process. And we see now even people coming up who have received their third ERC or even more. So people that have reached a certain level, these will generally be advanced grantees. They know the tricks, but that doesn't mean that it's just handed to them. It means that they learn the process of writing a good and distinguishing what is a good proposal, rather than having just a higher chance because, well, they might be famous or they might have a name or they might have an ERC grant already. That's really not the case. Here's an important point I want to make, and I want to focus here really on let's say, on the middle part to the left side of this scheme. This is for the starting grantees. And you will see that most people, they really wait towards the very end. So you see this peak here, these 6 years after they received their PhD, towards the very end of the eligibility. Of course, you have people beyond that 6-year limit, 7-year limit, because as I said before, they have these extensions because of parental leave and other reasons, which I didn't mention before. But what's really interesting, the point I want to make, is that the success rate is relatively flat. Of course, if we move to the right side, there are some outliers, but really focusing on the middle part, it means that there's no inherent advantage of waiting till the very end of your starting grant eligibility window. People that are at a very early stage, of course, if they're really ready for it, they're just as likely as the people that are more towards the end. So it's not always the best idea to wait for this big publication that you've been waiting for it to come out, because you might be at the very end of your eligibility window and you cannot reapply then again because you already passed the deadline for the same panel. So you have to go to the next category, to the consolidated grants, and that's again a different ball game. How do you choose a panel? That's a question people always ask. For some people, it's very obvious, then even better so. For some people, it's more difficult, especially if they're doing very interdisciplinary projects. We generally recommend not to, because you have the option of choosing more than one panel. We generally recommend against that because you will receive too many reviews from too many people that look at your project from too many different sides. So generally, this is rather negative. If you have a super interdisciplinary project, maybe it's even better even to think about a synergy grant. But if you're somewhat undecided and let's say you have two main panels that you're choosing from, generally I recommend choosing the panel that reflects the best methodology that you're using in your project, rather than, let's say, the impact field. If your project has an impact in a very different field, let's say you're working on mathematical modeling or physical modeling, but you have a very strong impact on, I don't know, life science. I wouldn't choose the life science panel because simply people will not understand your methodology and they might criticize it for you. So it's tricky really choosing the panel. We can discuss it. It's always good to have a look at panel members because if you're forgetting something or if you're choosing a panel that's slightly unfamiliar with your techniques and methodology, they might feel like you're stepping on their toes, and that's something you generally want to avoid, obviously. Who sits on the panels? So I discussed this previously. So you have the panel chair. They're always announced in advance. The panel members, they rotate. Well, the panel chairs rotate as well. But you don't know the panel members officially in advance. However, since they rotate on a 2-year cycle, you will get a pretty good feeling of who will be on your panel if you look at the panel from 2019, which is public. So a large part, maybe 60–70% of the people will still be present. You can even look at how many times these people were already in panels. So I believe there's probably an unwritten or maybe a written rule that people generally don't serve more than 4 rounds in a panel. So you can have a pretty good feeling who will be in the panel. So that might help you. Not in the sense, of course, in reaching out to these people, but more to get a feeling of what's their expertise, something along these lines. So I raised the interdisciplinarity before. Obviously, interdisciplinary projects are always the most interesting ones because it's generally in the boundaries between 2 fields where you find the exciting projects. But as I said, it's a balancing act. You need to consult with experts from both fields or even more fields to really get their opinions, because maybe you're missing an important part of the bibliography that you're not citing. And then people already have a pretty bad taste about your project if you're not mentioning their expert field and the publications they're in. So about the proposal structuring, I think that's an important part. So first, of course, you have the abstract. I say first, that doesn't mean it should be written first, but generally the abstract, and I think that's pretty obvious for everybody, but the abstract should be written the last. But they're very, very important because they condense so much information. But they are very important especially for the panel chair, to pick the panel members in his or her panel that will evaluate your proposal in the first round. So you need to focus on some elements that are listed here. I think they give you a good feeling. Please don't make the mistake of mentioning too much about the state of the art and what other people have done. No, it's really the abstract is for your project to shine, for you to shine. Sell your project in the abstract so that people understand what you're trying to do. It might sound very trivial, but I've written a number of ERC proposals where you need to wait until page 2 or 3 to really understand what is it that they are trying to do, and that it really shouldn't be that way. I didn't mention the abbreviation of the acronym of your proposal. Obviously, that's also important, but don't think about it too much. Just try that it's not just a weird acronym of letters that cannot be pronounced. The acronym is really something where people in the panel can refer to your proposal and be that they remember what is the proposal. Ideally, of course, it should relate to the science in your proposal, but don't make it complicated. Don't make it difficult to pronounce. Really have something. It's more important to have it easily to pronounce than to have it very accurately reflect what you're actually doing. And we can discuss this, of course, more personally. Part B2 should be, I generally recommend writing part B2 after part B1 after part B2. As I said before, the part B1 is more for the generalist, so it's more general information. So there should be obviously an objective, there should be a state of the art. Then you explain your methodologies, the challenges, maybe you include some preliminary results. That's always helpful, but don't go into too many details. Don't provide 2 pages of preliminary figures. Try to really condense this. And I don't mean condense, squeezing it very small and as much information as you can. It's much better to have less information that's very clear than to have all the information that you can think of, but have it unreadable. Also mention your resources already in B1 as a general idea. You can also speak a bit about the risk, but also about the impact. Then the part B2 should be, I believe, the part that's written first. It's the larger part as well. It's 15 pages. I give a rough estimation about the page size, but this is there's a very rough guide, and it should in no means be the gospel. So please do what makes sense for your project, but it's a rough indication. So again, it's more or less the same elements, but you just go into much more detail. That's pretty much it. But the risk mitigation here is important, even more so than before. And it's more about also, when you speak about the state of the art, it's more about so either way, you should always speak about where your project goes beyond the state of the art. But here, you need to really be more into the metrics, right? So how does it go beyond the state of the art, and how can be both qualitative and quantitative? So ideally, you have something that can be really, that people can understand and apply your logic, easily understand your logic and apply your logic to their reading. Then the methods, of course, are very important. So you go into a lot of depth there. And the resources, you spend a bit more time and space as well. It can be good to include, sometimes people don't do this, a timeline for your team. It can be very brief text or very brief graph, but just show that obviously you will not recruit everybody on the first day, and how are you planning to do this? If you're involving PhD students, you have to take this into account, and all these things. Make it clear that you made up your mind and that you chose the right things at the right moment. Again, some general tips about the proposal structure. So the clarity is, I think, one of the most important elements, that you get to the point, that you're not trying to write some very fancy language that nobody understands with sentences that take 5 lines, with paragraphs that take 2 pages. Please don't do this. It's very hard to read for anybody. So there are very good books on scientific writing. I think people are more, there are really good guidelines about it. So that's really something I recommend. Don't just think because you have been publishing quite a lot and in good journals that you have a natural skill for good writing. That's not necessarily the case. A proposal shouldn't necessarily be just the same language than can go in a journal. It's not the same thing. So most of the things I'm saying here are very generic, but I realize that you are aware of most of these things, but it's always good to have a reminder. I always find. Yeah, make it readable, make it polished as well. Sometimes that's something where either your research department or even consultants can help you to make it look polished. It shouldn't be, a brochure or a commercial document. That's very clear and everybody understands that. But please put some energy into making it look nice, easy to read. You can use color coding. You can use different formatting to highlight your ideas. All of that. You will see if you can get access to some successful proposals. That's always a big plus. If not, please get in touch. Maybe we can help. Maybe we can't. I don't know. But this is where you get ideas of what has worked for other people. Please be aware. Ideally, ERC projects are really hypothesis driven. So I write here no fishing expeditions. It's depending on your research fields. It might be difficult to understand what that means. But it basically means it shouldn't be, it's always difficult. A good example, if you're more into life science, are these multi-omics projects where you collect, you basically, what you want to collect and more or less the rough direction where you want to go. And you will collect a lot of data in the first part of your project. And then in the later part, you, out of hopefully one of these candidates that you will pick up, you will develop something more hypothesis driven. And this can be very difficult to sell. Of course, there are plenty of examples like this, but please be aware that this hypothesis driven research is something that's highly valued. So if you don't have it, think about how you address this issue. What's also important is it shouldn't be iterative research. What that means, it shouldn't be a continuation from what you've been doing before, just with a better machine and with a bit more samples and with a bit more, I don't know. It should build on your previous expertise, but it should go significantly beyond. But again, this significantly beyond is very difficult to really define, and every reviewer might have a different definition of that. As we move along the proposal, I will skip over a few slides, but you will find them afterwards in the recording, so you can take a bit of time and read through them. I didn't want to hide this information, but I realized that we cannot get into all the details in 1 hour. So please don't hesitate again afterwards to discuss and ask about some of these elements afterwards by email or whatever. Here on this slide, I want to focus a bit on some specific points for the starting grants, because, well, it's the first deadline that will come up, and even if you're not ready for this deadline, it's still important for the future deadlines. And generally, starting grantees, they have not so much experience with writing this sort of very competitive grants, so they might need a bit more help. That's why I'm focusing a bit on that, but generally these lessons are also important for the other ones. So for the starting grants, the independence, to show the independence is important, and to show where you're complementary to what is being done in your research institute, maybe your new research institute where you will move to. If you involve other people in your team or even your team members that you will recruit, show how they're complementary to what you're doing, but at the same time show how you will be able to supervise them properly if they have an expertise that's outside of your field. That's something important to consider. The creativity is something that's also often an important element for starting grant projects, to show that you're creative, you're independent of your previous supervisors, you're coming up with your own ideas. It's tough, everybody knows this, but it's try to put some energy into this, or at least highlight it in the proposal. Show that you have the skills somehow to be able to manage such a large project and research group. Maybe you're very junior researcher and might not be familiar with this size of projects, and so this is something you need to address, and you can build on previous expertise, on supervisions you've done yourself. There are plenty of examples that you can take, but you need to take it, and you need to devote some space into it. Why do you want a project now? It's somewhat counterintuitive to what I said before, but there will certainly be reviewers that say, well, you know, this person is still very junior, so why didn't they develop their research idea for a few more years and wait until they've published some on this research field? So that's something you can anticipate, right? So anticipation is the best defense, I think, and you can. I think it makes your project stronger, and the proposal certainly. It's important to convey your passion and enthusiasm. It's difficult to do that in a written form. It's easier to do it in the interview, but try to think of it as an additional factor to factor in passion for your project. It's difficult to really put into words how to do that. The work plan should be well structured. Obviously, use Gantt charts and path diagrams to illustrate that you're understanding how to organize a project and to make it more realistic for people to understand what you're trying to do, that you're on top of things, that you know how to manage people and the team and the project in terms of project management. Often that's also something where consultants can help you. Continuity versus revolution, I addressed this somewhat before, so I won't get into too much details. This is really about this incremental research and trying to get a bit outside of your comfort zone. This is important, I think. These are a bit the different layers of support that you need when writing. So obviously you need some sort of institutional support, or many of the research institutions have now grants offices that work quite well, that help them either financially or administratively with their projects and the proposal building. Of course, you need your peers. They can be from your institute, but they can also be outside. So think of it as like a scientific advisory board, something like these, that you can build yourself based on colleagues, based on people from your field, based on past grantees. These are really people that should and need to provide very critical feedback so that you can anticipate it and address it. Consultants can help. They're not mandatory, of course. There are consultants that are specialized in ERC proposals. Sometimes it's good to get a few ideas of how they work, what their business models are, what they can deliver to you. Don't just assume that because the company that these consultants come from has a good name, that the consultant that will work on your proposal also automatically knows exactly what they're doing. Sometimes you get very junior people. That's fair enough. They need to learn somewhere as well. But you need to get a feeling and need to know what it is that you expect from them, but also what it is that they can give to you, so that there's a matching between these expectations. If you have trouble finding consultants that are specialized, we have a few, and it's a growing list. So obviously there's always newcomers to the field, but also let us know if you have positive or negative experience with consultants. It's also something that's good for us to know. And then as another layer, we see ourselves, the MCPs. I explained to you previously what we can do in terms of services. I want to stress that it's also important not to involve too many people in your proposal writing and reviewing. Some people can manage this quite well, getting lots of different feedback and integrated it into one single thing. But especially for junior researchers, it can also be discouraging, and it can really bring you a bit away from your drive and your passion. to focus on 20 different issues and everybody's contradicting themselves. So I always want to stress that we only need to get involved if you think it's an added value. Please get in touch, because you might not know beforehand what we think and how we work. So again, that's something very personalized. So this is about collaborations. I won't go into the details of these slides. In most cases, this is something that will be discussed either way on a one-on-one hand. For Horizon Europe, what will change? It's not dramatic changes that will come. So you probably know, I guess, that Horizon Europe is the new program. Up until the end of last year, it was called Horizon 2020. So there are a few new panels. There are a few panels slightly changed their definitions of their keywords. So that's something to look out for. They are publicly available on the ERC website. There's now an interview round also for the advanced grants. That wasn't the case before. And then in the work program, there are some modifications to make it easier for applicants and evaluators as well to understand what is expected. So what are the next steps? Let's imagine that you are thinking of doing an ERC, and I suppose some of you certainly are, otherwise you wouldn't have tuned in. It's important to get started early, and I don't mean you need to start writing on your project 1 year before, but you should think about your ideas and your project and give it a lot of time to get feedback from many different sides, because it doesn't make sense to rush the proposal. It will be frustrating if you're not successful afterwards because you dedicated so much time to it. So really just at least take it into account, even if you have to rush it. Think about what you can realistically expect from the time that you will invest. That's I think the main point. Check with your peers about the idea, if it's timely, if it's novel enough, if it's relevant enough, and then sort of get writing and put your ideas to paper, because then you give other people a chance to criticize and get feedback. Obviously, you need to check internally with your internal institutional structures if they're on board, because they need to sign this off basically when you submit. And then, yeah, get writing as soon as possible. Involve us whenever necessary. If possible, try to involve ERC consultants. Again, it's not mandatory, but they can have the slight edge that you need. But not in every case. There's also people that don't like working with consultants, or maybe they had bad experience. That's fair enough. But at least think of it, giving it a chance, especially if you have institutional money for this, and many of the research institutes now offer this. Devote enough time to the writing. That's obvious. I know everybody has plenty of things going on, but keep it in mind. And then if you're successful and pass the round one, obviously you need to, again, devote a lot of time into the training. Again, there are consultants offering a lot of time, a lot of trainings for that, sorry. We generally recommend, and I know many of the institutions in Luxembourg do this, to have sort of mock interview rounds, and ideally have them several rounds, that you really can train for this, because it's by no means it's easy. It might be even more difficult to do this remotely, and so in all likelihood it will stay like this year. We don't know. So really prepare for that if you pass the first round. One thing I wanted to point out, I put a link here. The ERC has recently put up a video series that can be found on YouTube with trainings given by the ERC itself. I find them quite useful. Again, they are mostly reminders of good practices, but that's often really what's needed, right? There's nobody that can sell you the golden bullet to get an ERC. It depends on too many factors, one of which is luck, right? As always. So But have a look. I think it's quite well made. Thank you very much. That's it from my side. I will now have a look if there are any questions and try to answer them. The first question is on the ERC mentoring scheme and how it will work for Luxembourg. So you might have heard of this. This is something that the ERC has proposed and launched recently. It's called the ERC mentoring scheme. The main concept of this is to exactly for people that are working in fields or working in places, regions, institutions that don't have a lot of ERC grantees, or they don't have access to their colleagues to ERC grantees, to be put through the ERC into contact with past or current ERC holders in their particular field, in order to be mentored in some way or another. So how does this work? There are countries that have already this in practice. So they have institutions that offer this service. This is most often the case in the so-called EU 13 countries, so the new country member states that have less experience in ERC projects. So in Luxembourg, we don't have anything like this. This has various reasons, one of which is that the ERC wants this structure to be independent from the NCP structure, which would mean that Lux Innovation as such couldn't offer it. The other obvious choice would be the FNR for Luxembourg, because it shouldn't be institute specific. I know that, for example, the university, they have a very good team of people with a lot of expertise. But they would, of course, only offer these services for people from the university. The FNR would be a choice. I've spoken to them about this. Let's just say there was not an overwhelming interest for offering this. I think bottom line for this question is, please just get in contact with us. If you have the feeling that you need to be put into contact with previous grantees, this is something we've been doing anyways for the past years. Sometimes you already know the people, sometimes you don't. I strongly recommend doing your own researches because all the funded projects are public, so you can look for them. If you don't know where to look, please get in contact. If you have the names of these people and you don't want to contact them yourself, please let us know. We can contact them sort of as a neutral party. In the end, it's you need to know what you want to ask from these people, and you need to know what you can offer to these people. So meaning, well, in the past at least, you would have imagined that if you have really somebody with a mentor function, that you would want to have exchanges, traveling there, make them travel here to Luxembourg. So this needs to be funded somehow. That's even within these ERC funding mentoring scheme that will not be provided by anybody. So it needs to be provided nationally or by your institute, ideally. But you think about what you can offer to these potential mentors. In my personal experience, ERC grantees are very often very generous in sharing their knowledge. So they might not expect anything in return. And especially now with all the remote exchanges, it might be enough just to get put into contact with somebody and exchange a few ideas, a few recommendations. So don't hesitate to get into contact with them yourself. That's certainly not something we need to do. I recommend doing this, even the researchers themselves, but if you feel uncomfortable or if you feel that we can help you with that, that's certainly something we can do. Okay, so will we circulate through email the links with the panel compositions, ERC videos, and useful references? You will find a recording of this slides afterwards. So I realized that it will be difficult to just simply write down, because you cannot click on the recording to just write down these long URLs. So I will try to put them into the chat. and I will put them in 1 or 2 minutes. So you will find the links there. The panel composition, you can just go to the ERC website. It will be on the main ERC website. The ERC videos, I will put the link in the chat box in a second. So please just give me 2 minutes. So this is for the ERC, for the videos. And then I put another link where you find information about the evaluation criteria. So I will put these links in as well. Yeah, you can find the replays on our website, of course. And if you're not already subscribed to our newsletters, this is something where we always send around new information that comes to us from the commission. So make sure that you subscribe to this as well. I promise we won't spam you too much. So I hope these were the references that you needed. If you need anything else, please just get in contact with me afterwards. Yes, for good books on the scientific writing, I don't have them on the top of my mind. I mean, if you go on pages like Amazon, I realize that you find 20 different books, at least certainly. I have one in mind, but I cannot think of the title, so I will send you the link afterwards or communicate it on our website. But in many cases, they're always building on the same trains of thought, I should say. So it's probably not necessary to buy 5 different books. A copy of the slides. I don't think we'll provide the slides themselves. We will provide the recording. And I think that's all the questions I have so far. So if that's the case, thank you very much again for those that stuck around. Again, ERCs is something that's a very personal manner, so I really recommend you get in touch with us on a personal level to discuss it, because there's always exceptions and special cases, and so that's what I can recommend. So thanks again. Please rely on all the sources of information that you can get. Don't take the ERCs lightly. And best of luck. I think that's needed, and hopefully we can help you even beyond this webinar. Thank you very much. That's it.